Okay, can you guys see me? All right. Just trying to make sure, maybe the lighting, maybe I'm a little too dark for the lights. You see, my blackness has been, an object of curiosity whenever I'm walking around in Hong Kong. The first year I was in Hong Kong, I was in school here in TEDxCUHK, where I study here. And then there was this classmate who came to me. And then she came to me, it's like, innocent. And then I said, oh, what's up? Like, can I ask you a question? I'm like, yo, go ahead. I'm like, don't get offended. I'm like, no, I'm not going to get offended. Go ahead. I'm like, okay, I ask now. I'm like, yeah, I've been waiting. What kind of question is this? And then she's like, okay. Why your hand here so black, here so white? And then I was like, what? Why my hand here so black, here so white? What an interesting question. And then I was like, okay, all right, we are African, we like telling stories. I'm like, I'm from Africa, come on. I come from this village, in all these villages in Africa, when the babies are born, all the children are brought together, and then and then they put a huge fire and they start barbecuing the babies. When they barbecue the babies start to cry. When the baby is crying, they hold their hands like this, and then everything here becomes black and only here white. And then she was like, whoa, now I know. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, then, I go. And then I ran to the next class, what I was doing. And then the next day I came back, and then people were coming to me like, Innocent, your mother BBQ you. I'm like, no, that's racist. Who told you that? And then, but why was this successful? Why was this a successful story to this person who I was talking to? It's because I played on certain stereotypes, certain imaginations that this person had, something that she thought, as African, we are savages, we do barbecue our children, right? I played on these things, mainly because this is what, when people usually interact with people, this is what they might be able to think of a particular group, which is why today, when I'm in my talk, I'm going to address on what to think about when you are going to travel in a developing country, especially because I'm from a developing country. I'm from Zimbabwe. If you don't know where Zimbabwe is, okay, go to hell, But Zimbabwe is somewhere in the southern Africa. Okay, so if I may ask, all of us have probably traveled. If you have, what kind of preparations do you make if you are traveling? This is the question that I want to ask, people. What kind of preparations do people make? Maybe before I even continue on this, let me find out I'm talking to the right audience. If you have traveled before to a developing country, could you please raise your right hand, please? Okay, all right, I can't really see. It's all dark over there. But, at least you guys can see me. But I can see some hands that some people have indeed traveled to developing countries. And what sort of preparations do people make? The first thing that usually comes to people's mind is that, we should be able to do some immunization. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. We should be able to do all the other things. Before this talk, I went to Google, and then I went to check. I was like, best travel tips. And then these are some of the things that came out. Pack a light, always pack a towel, and all the various things that people usually would think about when they are going to travel. This is okay. This is totally fine to think about these things. You come to Africa, maybe you might not prevent yourself from malaria. We don't know. But my argument today, or my contention today, is that when we travel, there should be one single most thing that we should think about as travelers, to a developing country especially. And that thing is that we should think about the dignity of the people we visit. I'm not going to ask anybody here who has thought about the dignity of people they are visiting before they go to travel to a particular country. We should think about it before we go there, during the time we are there, and even after we have left that particular place. When we are posting all those cute pictures of us on Instagram, we should always be thinking about the dignity of the people we are visiting. Dignity, what is it? That inherent and inborn worth that a person is worth of respect, even despite their status, whether they are in a refugee camp, or whether the person is illegal, or whether the person is even a convicted criminal, they still have that dignity, that they should be treated with dignity. Maybe some of you, I'm like, that's not me, But let's figure out at the end of this talk, whether you have been treating people with dignity when you are going to the developing countries. I have traveled recently. I've gone to some other countries in Southeast Asia, especially some developing countries. Before traveling, I used to think that, having dignity being being taken away or being stepped on was a monopoly that only Africans had. And then when I went to the Southeast Asian countries that I went recently, I realized that Africans don't have a monopoly on our dignity being stepped on and smashed on. Even countries in Southeast Asia do have this problem that they are facing. The first place I went to recently was, I went to Myanmar. On the right there, is a picture of me at an IDP camp. IDP camp is sort of like a refugee camp, but mostly for internally displaced people in that particular place. How do I approach these people when I go to that particular place? These are some of the questions most of the people don't even know, or am I going to interact with people who are in these kind of particular places? As you're going to hear more in this story, I came here in Hong Kong as a refugee myself. So when I went to this refugee camp, I knew how it felt like being treated by people who come to look at me as some alien who's come from somewhere who doesn't know probably what he's doing. The first thing that I don't usually do when I go to these kind of places is coming like, oh, poor you, your life sucks. This is a common thing that people would usually do. They treat you as some exotic alien thing, which is totally not relatable somebody that you cannot relate to. Some of us have been guilty here. Maybe you've seen somebody on a wheelchair, someone trying to cross the street, and how do people usually approach that particular person? They'll go there, they'll be like, oh, they change their voice, lower the tone. I'm like, oh, can I help you, please? I'm like, why are you changing the voice? It does show that there is a particular superiority complex that a person has when they are addressing that particular person in a wheelchair. And that's totally wrong. That is something that should change. That's something that should change. When I got there, you know what happened when I left? I was about to leave this IDP camp. They said, we have been here for 5 years. This family that I was talking to, they've been there for 5 years in that camp. And it's the first time that they ever felt like they've been interacting with a person from outside, and they feel that person is treating them like human beings. They encouraged me, like, can you go to all the IDP camps around here in Myanmar? There's hundreds of them. I couldn't go to all of them and be able just to interact with them. I did not go with medical stuff. I didn't go with food or anything. These people were even struggling in Myanmar. They've been, there is a war in Myanmar, in Kachin, that has been going on for 60 years now. And these people were struggling. They didn't even have anywhere to sleep, Some of them were sleeping under the rain with an umbrella outside. As you can see, some of the housing aren't really enough to accommodate the people. And then I recently visited also Indonesia. In Indonesia, I went there. I visited some of as they highlighted earlier, I work with migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. So I visited some of their homes so that I can be able to understand also where they're coming from and be able to interact them at a better level. And when I went there, it was almost, again, the same thing, that people feel like the treatment is very, very different. It's not like they only interacted with foreigners now. They have interacted with many, many foreigners before. But the treatment was very different. Of course, I do admit that it also has to do with my background, that I've been on that side where they are, where people come and treat you like some alien, which should be treated differently. And then lastly, another place I want to highlight, I went to the Philippines. I went to the Philippines. In the Philippines, I went to one of the places near Quezon City, which is, in Metro Manila, which is considered one of the poorest places in Metro Manila. In Quezon City, I've been there 2 times. And these people have been, taking me around and then meeting other different people in there and just talking. I never had money. I didn't have any money to give to these people. We're playing basketball, but again, the treatment that we have had there, these are wonderful people, but in the end, they felt like the treatment was better off than anybody else that they have interacted with. And I'm going to continue later, and then you can be able to see why I think, these things should be continue to be addressed, as we continue to talk. This was again in the Philippines. I know the lady on the right there, my right. She's also working here in Hong Kong as a migrant domestic worker. She was also my host, and they never had to feel pressure when I was there. Like, oh my God, so where are you going to take shower? They just like, we just take shower wherever everyone is. The pressure that they usually would feel when they're interacting with other people. So. That's my traveling experience. And then now, on my background, I was born in Zimbabwe, in a mining town called Hwange. And when I was in Zimbabwe, the mining town is next to a national park, a bigger version of a zoo, a national park with, thousands of animals. you could imagine my experience there with tourists. I had tourists coming to my place all the time. We had tourists coming every single day. And next to the Hwange National Park is the Victoria Falls. The Victoria Falls is by surface area the largest waterfall in the world. And all the time I meet tourists coming there. And one of the things that was common, because of the language that I speak, you would find tourists come to us, and then they say, could you please, do some monkey dance and, speak in that clicking sound of yours, And then I give you a few dollars. And then some of the people will be given a couple of dollars so that they can be able to speak in some, click sounds, doing some monkey dances, just to show that I do actually speak in click sounds, something like this. Amaxoxo lamaxegu aqoqoda ephuma phandle enqabalala ehamba phandle. So it's like xa amaxoxo. So this is something that fascinated the people there. That they'll say, I'll give you $2 and then you can be able to do this while you are doing some dances and stuff. I refuse to participate in these things. Some of my friends were doing it. I felt it was very disrespectful that this person is coming to me to tell me to a click speaking monkey in front of them. That shaped me. And one of the things why I was able to sort of realize this was problematic is also because the people I used to listen to, the people I used to read when I was growing up, and one of my role models growing up is this gentleman here, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, whom I believe every one of us know, when he was having an interview with Oprah Winfrey, he said something that has stood with me even today, which is fight the battle for dignity. That I have to continue fighting the battle for dignity. He was talking of his experience in prison, but when I've been in Hong Kong, especially as a refugee, as I'm going to highlight later on, I always had to fight the battle for dignity. The experience is not cute. The experience is really rough, but I have to continue fighting that battle. Yeah. So this is what have people who have grown up for me reading, who have also made me think through why dignity matters. Why people, when they are going to visit people, they have to think mostly about dignity. So going back in history, as we are talking a bit about the past, it's not the first time that Africans who have been treated, in funny ways. These are some of the descriptions that some of the travelers who have been to Africa in the past would describe the African people. They say, it's people without heads, having their mouths and eyes on their breasts. This is actually an image of somebody who actually saw the Africans. I'm like, how could you come up with something after you actually see a person? You better be really either blind, I have no idea. Like, why would you come up with something like that? This is historically. And then another incident that happened while I was in Zimbabwe was a time when certain tourists who were sort of volunteers from America came to my town, and then they said, we are helping to build a church. It was a very inconvenient time for all of us in the community. So during the day, the tourists will come and they put all the bricks, build, And then at night, when everyone is sleeping, we check, our Americans, are they sleeping now? And then we check, they are sleeping. And then we go out and then we start removing all the bricks, We remove all the bricks and then we rebuild again to the level that they left. We didn't want to destroy their ego because, why were we doing this? We have to do this every day. The reason we're doing this is because these American tourists did not even know how to build anything. They just thought maybe they can come somewhere from Nebraska and then they're going to just come in Zimbabwe and start building stuff. They never really asked us for our help to figure out how do you actually do this thing. This thing was quite inconvenient to us, So some of the things I have highlighted so far before I could actually get into what could possibly be done when we are traveling, First thing I highlighted, is that when these tourists would come to us taking pictures without our consent, treating us as if we are in a zoo, that zoo feeling, it's a really disgusting feeling, I can tell you. Most of the people don't think about it for whatever reason, but feeling like you're in a zoo, it's really, really bad. And then the idea of, exploitation, and then the idea of inconvenience and infantilizing, like treating like babies, like, oh, you poor, you are dying, you need some help. That's the thing that was very, very problematic to us. So, going back a bit on my story, I said I came here as a refugee. I was among the 5,000 people who were kidnapped by the Robert Mugabe regime in Zimbabwe. And then when I left Zimbabwe, I was kidnapped and I escaped. But, this talk is not about escaping, It's about something else. But if you're interested in my escape story, maybe we can talk later. But for now, I'm just going to continue and talk about, my life after I came. So I came to Hong Kong. When I came to Hong Kong, I couldn't actually travel for 4 years. That's what happens in Hong Kong. The government confiscates your passport if you are a refugee. And then I couldn't travel for 4 years. That wasn't easy. And that 4 years, I had to be dealing with people who are coming to look at me. Even when I was in Hong Kong, like I was in some kind of zoo somewhere in Chongqing Mansions or somewhere else. These are some of the things that I had to interact. But in all my experience growing up in Zimbabwe, as well as being a refugee in Hong Kong, I found out one key thing in my life is that dignity is very fragile. Most of the people don't think about it. But if you're really going to go to these places, if you want to visit, if next time you're going to go to India, you're going to go to Indonesia, you're going to go to the Philippines, you have to think a lot about dignity. Dignity is very fragile, and it's very sad, it's very tough for some of us on the other side when you are interacting with the actually nice people who are just trailing on our dignity without actually thinking about it the most. So, what are some of the lessons I've learned in this particular experience, and some of the things that I always try to pass to when I'm doing the Wandering Voice or the Africa Center to the people who participate on the treatment that they have to do. First thing is patterns. Patterns really matter. Patterns really matter when it comes to these particular interactions. On the right there is my bookshelf here in TEDxCUHK in my hostel. I arrange my books based on subjects and also authors' names. But if my uncle, who probably doesn't know how to read, if he comes to my house and then he said, "Oh, hey, can I help you arrange your books?" Or he comes like, "Oh, let me be nice and arrange his books." He might be able to end up arranging those books in terms of size or in terms of color. And then when I come back here and I want to pull out one of my books, I won't be able to find it because the patterns have been different. The same thing happened when you are going to these particular countries. There are different patterns that we should respect. On the other side, there is a picture of the traffic in India. Somebody might say, "Oh, these Indians, their traffic is chaos. These people are very backward. Why do they have stuff like that?" But it's a pattern that you should put effort to understand how do these people drive in a particular way. It's not because it's inferior. It's mainly because it's different. And don't be a lazy person who just think maybe your way of doing things is more superior than the other. So patterns really do matter. And the next thing is context. Context matters the most in this particular thing. On there's one gentleman, a British gentleman called Captain Cook. Captain Cook was a British, gentleman who went to the Hawaiian Islands sometime in the past. And then when he went to this island, he found these natives who were there. And then when he got to the natives, they welcomed him like a god. They treat him like a god, give him a big feast. And then you were like, "Oh my God, this treatment is really wonderful." And his crew, the people he came with, they were treated like, also mini gods. And you know what this crew was doing? His crew was going to women, using nails and say, "Oh, I give you nails, you give me sex." And then they continue doing that. Sex for nails, sex for nails, sex for nails. And then Captain Cook and these people were like, "Okay, this is really fun. We're enjoying this." And then later on, after some days, they said, "Oh, we are going back to Britain." And when they were going back to Britain, there was like a storm. And then they said, "No, we might die in the water if we stay in the storm. Let's go back to the island." When they got to the island, the natives killed these people. They killed these British gentlemen, and they were like, "Why are we getting killed? Killed. But do you know why they were killed after they've been treated like gods? The key answer is in context. The reason they were killed is that the people had seen them actually as gods when they came, because the natives were praying at that particular point for a certain kind of god to come. But why then were they killed? When the natives, when they come back, they were praying for a different god. And then that different god, they were expecting a different god. And the belief in that Hawaiian island was that if these two gods come together at the same time, they will cause bad luck, earthquakes, and all the stuff that will end up killing people. So they say, "You know what, to be safe, let's kill these people." The interaction was totally different. The people from Britain, they thought they actually were superior. They were close to gods. And the people in the Hawaii Island, they actually had a different experience. It's the same thing. You go to a place, maybe because of lack of knowledge, because of their complex with maybe whiteness, and they're like, "Okay, I can exploit them. I can exploit them sexually. I can exploit them in another way. I know these kids cannot eat the next meal. I'm going to make them talk like click-speaking monkeys so that I can give them money." And that is a problem that actually arises mainly because of actually. So it's very important that we understand the context that we are interacting with the people. And put effort to figure out how they see you and how you see it, and don't exploit it. If you see that the power relations are like this, that is actually a bad thing to do, to exploit. So lastly, as an anthropology student, I'm just going to highlight some of the things that we think about as anthropology students when it comes to actually interact. How do you synthesize the things you are looking at? The first thing, you look at the material level. The material level is the things you see. It's just the ordinary things you see, chopsticks, spoons and chopsticks. Many people stop there. If you go to India, you only see cows on the street, and then you stop there like, oh, these barbarians. Why do they have cows on the streets? And that's an issue that people don't think about. Look at the material level, and then don't stop there. Go a bit more one level down, which is look at the symbolic level, the religious aspect of the cows. Talk to the people, hear how they explain their own cultures, and be able just to at least appreciate their own perspective on their own things that they are doing. And lastly, you look on the ecological level. An anthropologist called Marvin Harris, when he was explaining why Indians have cows roaming around and why they don't eat cows, why they don't do all the other things, he suggested that it's because in the past, the Hindus used to actually eat cows, but later when the Muslim came, they decided that they would, to differentiate them from Muslim, they would stop eating. But that's one thing. And then the other reason is that, they also use it for milk and all the other things and farming. So if they do that, they would not be able to continue with if they eat the cows, they won't be able to fully finish those things. And lastly, as I said, prioritizing dignity is what should be the main thing when we are visiting these places. We need to rethink, we need to reflect, we need to reconsider, especially at least for the sake of us on the other side. And what should we be rethinking about? We should rethink about some of these things that we should be rethinking when you go to these developing countries. One, how do these people see me? Am I just another Captain Cook? Two, am I doing this for cultural capital and then so I can post on Instagram and people think I look cool? 3, am I doing it for emotional capital so I can feel better about many other things? 4, am I infantilizing? Am I treating them like they're some stupid shit that doesn't know what they're doing? 4, am I inconveniencing? Like you're coming and building churches that you don't even know what you are doing, And lastly, and most importantly, am I robbing anyone of their dignity? Thank you.